Lord Sauron. Please take note of the hobbits. You know, those hobbits that will eventually take the ring to Mordor. The earliest of them started sometime in the Third Age. You have known about the men and elves for quite a while, which is why they were more likely to succumb to your power. However, the hobbits will not be so easy. Remember how hard it was for Galadriel to succumb to you despite her being an elf? It would be even worse with the hobbits, at least initially, but once you follow my plan, they will be so easily corrupted. Mwah! This is because they will be most concerned with matters of the Shire, their gardens, and their simple little lives. But have no fear, this is your chance, since at least one of them will be taking the ring to Mordor. Let me take a moment to tell you about the history of the hobbits. Since they are most resistant to your ring, they will be among the chosen ones. I am going to show you how this all came to be by telling you about their histories. They would find the men and elves west of Eriador, between the Misty Mountains and the Mountains of Lune, with a remnant still there in the Dunedain. However, such earlier settlements were long forgotten by the time of the hobbits. This is why, while you have already tried to claim the elves and men and have war with them, you haven't been able to reach the hobbits yet. One day you will if you follow my lead. Just trust me, my little servant, especially since you came to me admiring my power. Not only are hobbits considered by our enemy the unlikely ones, but they also have their own little system. Unlike the elves, men, and dwarves, the hobbits even established their own land. The hobbits took the land for their own with the last battle of Furnos with the witch king of Angmar, choosing their own chiefs, a thane, to hold the authority of the king that was gone. At once, the western hobbits fell in love with their new land, and they remained there, and soon passed once more out of the history of men and of elves. While there was still a king, they were in name his subjects, but they were, in fact, ruled by their own chieftains and meddled not at all with events in the world outside. In 1601 of the Third Age, the Fallahide brothers, Marcho and Blancho, went from Bree to Argilead, the High King in Furness, crossing the Brown River Baron Duin, with other hobbits following them, passing the bridge of stone bows, taking all the land to dwell between the river and the Far Downs. They were asked to keep the great bridge in repair and acknowledge the lordship of Argilead II. Thus began the Shire reckoning, for the year of the crossing of the Brandywine, as the hobbits turned the name, became year one of the Shire, and all later dates were reckoned from it. As a result, the years of the Third Age will be found by adding 1600 to the dates of Shire reckoning, which goes to show they have their own little world, the protection, if you may, from our wills. There are three types of hobbits: the Harfoots, Stores, and Fallowhides. The Harfoots were browner in skin, shorter and smaller, and they had more to do with the dwarves than the other two types. They started moving west early, going into Weathertop. They were most normal and representative, as well as the most numerous, and more inclined to settle into one place. The Stores were broader and heavier in build and lingered long by the great river Anduin and were less shy of men. They came after the Harfoots and followed the course of the Loud Water southwards and would dwell there for a short period of time before moving northwards. Lastly, the Fallowhides, such as the Tooks and Masters of Buckland, came afterwards, being the least numerous in the northerly branch. They were more friendly with the elves and were more skillful in language and song than crafts and preferred hunting. Since Merry and Pippin were Tooks and Masters of Buckland, they would fall into this category, the Fallowhides. Frodo and Bilbo would also, since Frodo is half a Brandybug and Bilbo is half a Took, which is why they would be so resistant to the ring. Sam Gamgee, however, would be partially raised by Bilbo. He lives in Backshot Row and is now walking along with Frodo to take the ring to Mordor. Sam is also a vulnerable character, but in a different way than Frodo. Sam is a gardener. He worked for Frodo and Bilbo in Bag End as he lived down the street. Unfortunately, he eavesdropped on Frodo and Gandalf as they were talking about your power and your ring, so he will be going along with Frodo to Mordor, as Gandalf will be too powerful as a wizard and a fellow Mayan. While they may be the most unlikely creatures who will always surprise our enemies, the most vulnerable one will be whomever that ends up being the ring bearer. Because you really slacked off when Bilbo had your ring in his pocket. You didn't show up for Bilbo when he went off to Lonely Mountain, which was exactly what Gandalf wanted. This is why the wizard of all the Istari would be picking one of them to take the ring to Mordor. He thinks that you won't be as easily swayed by the hobbits, at least not as much as Gandalf himself or even the elves and men. It would be worse than Sauron, one would say, if Gandalf took the ring to Mordor, as they would fight fire with fire, which is what we want to do. So this is why Gandalf appointed Frodo. And when he did and looked at the one ring in his hand, we reminded Frodo that he can't do it. We made him feel helpless on his way and showed him all the benefits he could have by just putting it on and disappearing, which he did at Bree. Another point of vulnerability is friendship and fellowship. Frodo and Gandalf both know he can't do it on his own, so they appointed a fellowship. This idea of a fellowship would be that Frodo would be the main ring bearer and the other characters would follow him and aid him along the way. The moral of the quest would be that they can't do it alone, and when Frodo is reminded of that by his comrades, I convinced him that he must go to Mordor alone, but Sam was just too stubborn to let Frodo go alone. Pippin wasn't supposed to be looking at the Palantir, though he did, which was why you initially thought he had the ring. In that sense, since you thought Pippin had the ring, he spared Frodo. But really, Frodo ended up being the chosen one, so now it is up to you to stop him from taking the ring to Mordor. Now, Frodo's already been out with his trusted companion, Samwise Sam Gamgee. He was an interesting character, and his main motive was to accompany Frodo to Mordor. When the fellowship broke up, Sam vowed to stand by his side. It might be difficult to separate the two, but I'll see what I could do. At the very least, I should appoint you to stop Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor. Let's jump back to the moments before that for a second, where we made our last attempt to separate a friendship. Boromir joined after his brother had a prophetic dream and sought help from their father. Boromir eventually agreed to accompany Frodo as part of the fellowship, though his main motive was to save Gondor. Boromir saw the ring. We convinced him it would protect and defend the realm of Gondor and his people. But would he really have done that with the ring? Obviously not. It was our greatest ploy, Sauron, to allure Boromir to the ring so much that he would take it from Frodo. This would not be the first time we would allure a character to a tangible object by breaking the bonds of friendship, their biggest obstacle to fulfilling my will. As we discussed before, you were able to break the bonds of Ar-Pharazôn, the final king of Númenor, and Amandil, the last lord of Andunia of Númenor. That was what I feared would be your biggest obstacle, that you were able to convince Ar-Pharazôn the pitfalls of the Band of the Valar. What is friendship anyways? Friendship doesn't accomplish anything. Friendship is a fluke. Friendship necessitates giving up the most precious things in our lives. We convinced that if Ar-Pharazôn kept Amandil in their council, then they both would die anyways. If not, they both would die too. Our job is to convince that friendship doesn't accomplish anything tangible, is a fluke, and necessitates giving up the most precious things in our lives. If Ar-Pharazôn didn't cut ties with Amandil, he would not have been able to discover his desire for immortality. This is why one of our significant tactics is to separate the members of the Fellowship. My main tactic involves using your truest desires, highlighting their different viewpoints, personalities, and backgrounds, and desires from each other, and using said differences to pit them against each other. For example, we were able to separate Boromir from Frodo by convincing Boromir that Frodo didn't know what he was doing and Boromir knew better than Frodo what to do with the One Ring. This was very easy to do for a hot second. After all, Boromir was a brave and skilled warrior who was loyal to his realm Gondor. Unfortunately, Frodo stuck to his plan, which was why he was chosen to take your ring to Mordor. Now that Frodo and Sam are well off on their way, our goal is to get Frodo into this cycle of wondering whether he should be even doing the quest anyways, and for him to potentially leave the quest. Make him forget all the ring nonsense. This is your ring. How dare he try to take it to Mordor? He might even throw it in the fire, ending anything you have with it. Fëanor didn't like when people bothered with his Silmarils and when I lusted over them. See, he thinks I lusted over them, but I just enjoyed them and wanted the Silmarils to take back my power over his. You will be similar. While it will be a bit challenging to get through to them, once you get to the ring bearer, he will become one of your own, if not now. right when Frodo reaches Mount Doom. He will already have gone through months of starvation and exhaustion to the point where he can't be convinced otherwise. It's never too late to stop them from taking the ring to Mordor, until it is. Ta-ta for now. Melkor Morgoth.